So I need to make this video. Um, okay, so I'm being as honest as I can and accurate, but obviously there's always sort of these nooks and crannies of details that can really try to change a story. But I get to the very basis of it, and you make the judgment and analysis on your own. This is about my biological father. Now I'm trying to remember when I saw him. Why would I have been? Because I remember, I want to say I had like a bottle of milk on my armpit. Because a little kid, you know how to carry the little bottles or something. You're holding your bottle, your milk. You're like 4 years old. I want to say it was before I was in first grade. I want to say it was maybe even before was in kindergarten. I want to say I was about 3 to 4 years old. I'm almost positive I wasn't five. So I'm going to say I was about 3 or 4 years old. My biological, if he's still alive, he will be able to identify this if he has a good memory and he can remember. Now, you know, when I said that I thought I saw him, why was I standing outside? It was like broad daylight, no one outside. I wasn't playing toys. It was right on the front porch, just a few feet. I wasn't even sitting like right off the porch. I was right on the porch, and I want to say I looked at this guy, and I remember, I don't know what it is, but remember thinking this guy's my dad. Like, I come from this guy. Like I'm connected to this guy, because when he looked at me, I want to say for a moment, he looked at me and he kind of went like, and he goes like this and kind of put his head down. So he's looking like this, and goes, and kind of goes like this, and he sort of looked away. Now, this is going to be the catch of the situation, because you'd have to find out, ask my mother, but my mother obviously is sick. She can't remember things. But I don't know. Maybe she can, and I'm just not being allowed to talk to her. And I want to say that my mother either saw, or she would have known. If he came from that house, she would have known that when he gets off work, he goes over there and he stops by over here. So if I come from this guy, then my mom had to have been associating with this guy for a significant amount of time. It wasn't just a booty call. Because in order for me to have been born into this world, he had been into the picture years before I even saw this guy. And I was 3 to 4 years old when I first saw Hector. And I want to say, eventually he got his own car, which was the same Honda Accord this black guy over here is driving. But I want to say, I don't remember. He could have parked his car, but I don't know. I want to say he didn't have a car maybe at the time. I don't know. Maybe he did, but I want to say, you'd have to find out from Jamie's family and the guy. I don't know if he's related to him. I think he was a co-worker. And I think they worked together because they wore the same clothes, and they kind of looked like work outfit. Like jeans and a dress shirt and like working boots. And it wasn't construction. They probably worked in a warehouse somewhere. And I remember, Mikayla, you're gonna want to know this as well. And I remember him just sort of walking, but I want to say he made eye contact with me, and it was very far distance. He made eye contact, and I remember looking. I said, I don't. I don't know, like, the relation experts who know babies, like, the professional psychologists and gurus that know babies' behaviors, like what babies expect from adults from the ages of like 6 months old to like 18 months old. Their learning behavior, the things that they're sort of searching for in the world that they're in, that you just got born into. All these fascinating things. So you'd have to ask them. But I remembered instinctively looking at this guy and thinking, this guy, I come from this guy. He looked exactly like me. He looked very much like me. The other guy, not so much. And the way that he looked at me, I remember it was like, it was like a connection of like his blood, a connection of his offspring, like like maybe you can sort of maybe like a, I don't know if this is the best example, the way that a lion can tell, even though all the little cubs, baby bear, little lion, baby bear, I mean little lion cubs, you could put 20 of them in a single room, and you can put one father. The father will know which ones are his kids and which ones are not. And that is, I don't know what that is. I mean, he can tell the instinct, and I don't know if it's instinct or by smell or it's something that I'm sure it's more inclined in humans. And I want to say that he either may had a grin, because this black guy over here is telling the shit at my biological father, and he put his head down, he started grinning. No, that's what your fucking dad did. You fuck your dad, and that's what he's doing. So for Ken Cooper and Kenneth, but anyway, that's what I saw. Now this is the thing about this. My mother, I wanted, because my mother has set me on the front porch. My mother never did this as a kid. My mother was always like superintendent around me. When I was a kid, my mother didn't work for a long period of time, and she was just involved all in my life. Like, she was feeding. She was a mother. She was a house. She was a mother. She was a home mom, which is the most important job in the world, as they say. So my mother didn't work, and she was always supervising me, and my mom was very catering. She would put Vaseline on my feet when I was an infant. She was just very in tuned. I believe my mother was more in tune into children than it is on some other women. I know that is, but to put the good stuff on my child. And because my mother always talked about my entire life, she always said that she jumped over the fence and over a cactus and suffered and got raped and was going through all these horrible things because she wanted to give her sons, I'm thinking of my kids, a better life. I want my kids to have a better life. That was always the mentality. My kids a better life. It was constantly like that. But it wasn't selfish. It was just like, it was everything from the clothing material to, which was, I noticed some of the behavior wasn't necessarily the same in other mothers. Everybody ranges. Now, I'm not a professional psychologist. You could break this down in so many different ways, how this actually happens. Because obviously my sister who lives next door hasn't moved in yet, who's my biological father's daughter who died. When your mother is trying to survive and you're being brutally fucking, beaten the shit out of by the world, and you have no education and you have no money, and this is in the 1980s, cell phones and Craigslist, you have a place to live. You find out a place to live by the people that you talk to in person. That's the only way that you're able to find a place to live. So especially if you don't know any education. And I still remember getting in the car with my mother when I was a little kid, going to McDonald's. And I remember like it felt like my mother was like a teenager. She was very young and she was very brave. And me and Frankie got into the car, and this happened several times. He goes, "Sí, mama, sí, sí podemos, sí, we can do it. We can do it. Okay, come on, we can do it." So my mother always had this, yes, we can do it. Yes, we can. Yeah, we can do it. She always had this, and I remember her vibes, okay? So anyway, my mother, now this is probably not something that's going to be holy jolly, holy words that you want me to hear to say about biological father, but my mother, I believe, put me outside. I'm almost 100%, because I didn't come outside at that young of an age just to sit on the porch to do nothing. I was attached to my mother. All kids are. But I wouldn't wander off to the front porch with the door closed, or that I could remember the door being closed. Could have been open, but I don't think it was open. I'm almost positive it wasn't open. To set me out there in the front porch because my mother knew that this guy showed up, which is my biological father. So my mother wants to show him, yeah, there's your son. And she's looking to see if he's willing to participate. And he didn't. He didn't come over right away. So I think this is what encouraged him, because he did show up after that. He did make an affirmation. Either he could have showed up that same day, maybe later, or the next day, but he showed up. And I don't know what the time frame is. From the very first time I saw him from a booty call to the very first time he met my father, it was all very a short period of time. He was between the ages of like 2 years, like say 2.5 years old to 5.5 years old, somewhere around there. But so I say this because my mother put me on the front porch to see if he would do anything and to see, is this guy gonna? Because one of the reasons I think of this behavior as well is because when I was a kid and my mother told me this guy over there was studying to drive an 18-wheeler, she was more in the mindset of like, I believe that, is this guy going to help me? Is this guy going to earn money and going to support his child? And I remember my mother sitting on the couch and doing this, like, no, it's okay, it's okay. So there was some sort of bitterness that my mother didn't like this guy, didn't want him, was upset because he didn't participate in any bills. He didn't participate, and she was expecting that maybe he would have a change of heart to knowing that, this is your child. Are you going to help? If you're not, then I need to find somebody else is, but it still hurts my mother. So I think it's important to talk about because it's very quick to do what the black guy over here is just scumming my biological father for Ken Cooper. I can't do anything in this larger picture. There's always these things that set in my mind. Jesus Christ and Barack Obama. The president, Jesus Christ, whatever he wants to scum me in, I accept the scum. Okay, Kenneth is a hero, Jesus Christ, I obey Jesus Christ, the Father, the Mother, the Holy Spirit, Jesus Christ, and then that's how you get away. And that's how he gets away, and that's how I give him whatever he wants. There's no argument for me anymore. There's nothing that I have not been allowed to participate in the righteous things that should have been allowed to happen many years ago. And the time is gone. When you talk about murder, suicide, this is what these people wanted to do. There's numbers of them that you make that decision. But at this age, this is my blood, my father, my mother, my blood, my sacrifice, my pain. And they took everything that they wanted. And it was teams of them, my work environments, and nobody wants to believe because everyone has problems. Okay, Jesus Christ again, Jesus. I don't feel that I can't do this without God. I mean, I'm fucking too old and I feel too old. This is not ever going to get better. I have to allow acceptance in God of the orders that are coming from the president and the orders that are coming from the people that are allowed to scum the situation. They're not there to fix. You are punishing the wrong individual, and that was me. And they're going to make up their own story. It was my fault, Jesus Christ. Okay, well, you just get a little, and then I get raped, and then whatever. I don't care. Jesus Christ, the president, okay, Jesus Christ. That's all it is. For whatever reason is in Jesus Christ, and other people don't have to worship, and they can just scum it whatever they want, and other religions, and say, well, this is just a better behavior because we don't understand the Bible. Okay, well, then they get away with that, but I'm not. There's nothing that I can do. So my mother put me on that front porch on purpose. I want to say that she opened the door and she just set me on the front porch just so to know that he would spot me. And I knew he would have known. Okay, so what does a male do? What does a guy do when he gets a girl pregnant? What is the ego? What does he do with the ego? What does he do with the fact that he just had sex with a woman? Because I've had sex with a woman before I got raped by a transgender. And they forced me to have sex with a transgender and trained me to. What is that behavior? For us guys, most of the time, it's usually pretty rational, basic senses, and for you real women, know understanding what that is. But there, obviously, pride is one of those things, and that because this is a very different time. Okay. Accessing women and accessing in the world that you live in and making babies is very different than it is now, than it is 20 years ago, than it was 45 years ago. The evolution of time, television, the cost of cars, the cost of working, the cost of rent, women, all that other stuff is very different. But he also got a white woman pregnant, which is a blonde white woman. How does that change the circumstances? Mikayla came to the world, beautiful girl, In my opinion, I always believe and understand someone gave him that woman. I just don't believe it could have been. I just don't believe either that, or I think they could have been a party. I don't know. My mother said something about cocaine, and maybe they were involved in cocaine. But I talked about Mikayla, got into the picture, and that's a girl, you know. But I do very, very much believe he was warded off to stay away from me because when I heard him on the phone, and he didn't have a connection toward me enough, or whatever it was, to really think to himself to me. I don't know how it is because I don't have kids to fall some tears over the phone, or like you can hear the desperation of like emotion. And it, I mean, I don't know, you could say this, but it sounded kind of somebody was holding him hostage over the phone. Because remember, when you don't do what I tell you to do, Miguel raped Frankie, you were going to punish you because you raped a little girl and you got her pregnant. Now I'm going to put you in your place. And so you won't ever hear about that. But you heard about Michael Jackson, didn't you? And I'm not saying it to my biological father. Remember everybody at school that knew about it? Exactly. So what happens is they'll terrorize him in his job site. He needs to work, he needs a job. Somehow in the mix of things, they sell him a woman. And that's what my opinion is. Because, to get a Barbie looking, if you looked at Mikayla's mother, she looks like Barbie. To get a woman like that, you go from my mother, who's an immigrant, to a woman like that, that is a Michael Jackson exchange. That is an investment that somebody else put. But because you're just a male, you put your balls right there. And yeah, and that's how you make babies. See, babies, and then you love down the end of the baby, and then kick his ass out. And you weren't a good dad, you're a rapist. Then Michael Jackson? Exactly. So I'm not blaming him. I'm not blaming him, but this is probably not the good part you want to hear. My mother was saying, "Oh, I don't care," and I remember because she was right after it was the same day, within that hour conversation that we had about this guy driving to drive an 18-wheeler, and my mother was like, he's studying, and the way her body is that she's excited, like maybe he's gonna help the family, or maybe he's gonna help financial. And my mother's sitting there crossed like this, like, see, she's like this, like kind of like this, but not like pissed off, but like this, and kind of a little bit of a joy. Si está estudiando para el forklift. Yeah, he está estudiando, sí. And so my mother's expression is like, yeah, he's a man, like, he's a hombre, yeah, maybe he's gonna help. And then it was like a couple weeks. I don't know, it was a couple weeks, and then I think my mother, she goes, no, yeah, no. And I don't know what the interaction was. I don't know how my mother would have found that out. Women have sometimes ways to find out things that, you had no idea they knew for 30 years, and you fucking, all kinds of shit, gossip. But I don't know how my mother would have found out that information. But it's a difficult situation because Mikayla's mother, she came over to our house, and there was a very mutual conversation between the two. It was very, like, when they talked with each other, it very much, because they tag teamed against him. Like when they when they went to Albertsons, you ever seen like a guy and two women had babies from the same guy, and he didn't say anything, and the girls go after him, like, like, and that's what it looked like. It looked like two women, and they were mutually whipped together, like, to scold him. And he was, that's what happened. But when I saw him at Albertsons, and he just walked by me and looked at me, and that was it. So anyway, I want to say this because you can make the analyzation of whatever it is that you want to make, and also for my mother, because my mother put me on that front porch. She sat me on the front porch and said, just wait right there. And she sat there because I think she waited, or she would have known. She would have known, okay, he gets off at 4 o'clock and he hasn't come over yet. Okay, I want to put the kid right here. I want to put the little kid right here. And I want to say she shut the door. Not mean, but just for a moment, or it cracked it open. or maybe she was looking out the crack of the door and had me just stand there. But I was standing there maybe no more than 5 minutes, no more than 10 minutes. Let's just say no more than maximum at the best 15 minutes. But I want to say I was standing there maybe 5 minutes, and he was already like they didn't just show up, or maybe he did just show up, or they were already standing out there. But he was 5-10 minutes. 5 minutes that I was there, and there was no one around. There was no kids. There was no toys. There was no reason for me to be standing there. And my mother just here, párate aquí, mira, quédate, mira, mira, estupa, or she may have said, but I remember very distinctly my mother wasn't around me, and just happened to look over there because I saw some guy, and maybe my mother was open with the crack of the door and just made me, mira, and so my mother, because that's what women do. That's kind of a girl thing that women do. They'll put the baby in front of the guy when the guy maybe doesn't participate to see how she behaves. She needs to think of the child because her life is the child and financial resources. That's the key of everything. But I wanted to say that. So that was the story of him. So, you know, I don't know. There's so many other circumstances, so many analyzation to what, but I thought it was important for me at least to share this. So, Mikayla, you know, there's nothing better that I can say is, just like you had that black crucifix around your neck and you showed it to me, there's nothing more that you're going to need. It's nothing my family and myself than the crucifix, Jesus, to fix God, to fix, to just have faith in whatever happens, Jesus Christ, because, there's no justice tool that nobody gave. The punishment that ruled on me, they prepared a long time ago. There's no fixing. I don't know how other way to say it. I mean, I just hope and have faith that God exists, and I have faith in Jesus. I have faith in Jesus. Whatever they want, they say and happened. Whatever the ending story will be, that's what they said. Whatever make-believe lies they're going to say, that was the truth, and that faith that Jesus Christ told them to say those lies because it was necessary, and it was a different perception because it was smarter brain. It doesn't matter. I'm too scared of the circumstances and too overwhelmed with the number of people that are very unfairly did this to my mother and me. And there's no fixing. It's just accepting the things that it can't be ever changed. And nobody believed or listened to me. But that was the story. My mother set me out there to see if he would do anything. But my mother talked about she didn't tell me that is your dad over there, or that was him that was over there. My mother didn't tell me that when she was sitting on the couch, and I'm about like 11 years old. No, it was after my dad's suicide. Maybe before. Gosh, I want to say, was it before my dad? Yeah, it could have been before my dad's suicide. I was somewhere between the ages of, because I remember standing, I want to say I was before my dad's suicide, yeah, maybe 10 or 11, I want to say, maybe 10 or 11, could have been a couple years after that, could have been a year, but I was older than 8 years old. I was at least 8 or 9 to 10 years old when she was sitting on the couch that she did this, saying that he trained. So you can estimate, you can find out and ask that guy or whenever my biological father, if he was studying to be an 18-wheeler truck driver, you could ask him when he actually did study or whatever it was. So you can find out and take a look to see what the age would have made me. So I remember very distinctly when my mother sort of in tune, and she was kind of like there's going to be a supporter. There was going to be hopefully another supporter. But I told my mother, I think I had another conversation, and she said something like, when we're sitting, she was sitting on the couch, she had the TV on, and she said something like, he goes, no, ya no va a estudiar, ya lo dejó. Sí. I don't care. So my mother says like, oh, I don't care, because she's emotionally, I believe, getting in tuned into something, because my mother wasn't allowed to have a man in her life. She wasn't allowed to have the relationship and emotions with a man. So the tug of war, how men and women find attractive, like if a guy really wants a woman desperately, a lot of the times the female will find that unattractive, very unattractive, even though he could be very healthy and very strong. But the attraction, the foreplay, and how attraction builds, and the stimulation of all these different types of components. There's classes and millions of videos and shit on the internet how to pick up girls and all this other stuff. My mother was never allowed that. So her how she expresses the relationships is going to be very minimized. It's going to be shrunk down and very minimized to very petty bullshit. And it's not really genuine because my mother she wasn't allowed. Remember, you have Diana slapping her, you have Diana, Miguel fucking raping my brother at a young age, punking him out. My mother's being abused by Rosie. My mother's being abused by people at her job. All these things are happening, so she stays in close, so she understands she doesn't get to have a man in her life. She doesn't have to have a male. Where there's a male in your life, and you talk to them over the phone, you have a relationships, whether you're not having sex, because everything isn't about sex. I'm talking about like, the relationships of communication. So my mother, this guy, to my knowledge, never spoke to my mother. But since my mother's so minimized that she's only good for making babies and profitable exchange for others, because that's what family is you make baby there, and it's how baby is, and then gay and babies, and you need money, and we were heroes, Americans like, and that's how they are. But that doesn't work in the natural world of men and a man and a woman. And those attraction chambers that build up, you know, and so how some of the things can make a woman feel a woman. So my mother doesn't get to feel like a woman. My mother only gets to feel the fact that she's having sex with an old man because she has to, and she's been prostituted and abused, and she only understood from a very young age, I have to make babies to bring a kid for you to feel sorry for you to be a family, and how make family work, pay the bills, make a better life to nurture my children. She doesn't get to venture off in the world like you see all the people in Hollywood and others on the streets, or even when you see gays or you see transgenders get into relationships. Even within them, my mother doesn't experience what they get to experience. Like, you get to have your own relationship with whatever fits you in your sexual world. My mother was cut off completely, just the way I was at a very early age. And so when you minimize the evolution of the woman not being able to evolve, because obviously men pick up women better and understand them better when they're 45 than they were 21. A lot of the times they understand women. It's just the evolution. Same thing with women. Women understand men better at 35 than when they were 18, than they were 25. When they were 40, they understand men way better than when they were 25. So my mother doesn't really get to evolve that. All my mother was confined to. So she has this desperate. She has this sort of, I want us to put a quality in my life by living this fantasy world, which is great because I do it. I mean, we all do it. You see a hot girl or whatever it is. For me, I see a hot, beautiful girl, and you'll fantasize about her for weeks or months, or for not necessarily like fantasize. It could be that, or you sort of fondue in your mind of this creative music, theatrical mind stage video in your mind of what you want things to be, and it's just make believe it, but that's just how we're in tune. So in these particular circumstances, so when my mother is sitting on a couch and she's like, she has no connection with this guy, she just know he got her pregnant, which my mother has the right, because she was connected to this guy at some point, but he just wasn't there in the picture anymore. So but I think it's important. Because they knew how to put my mother. So when my mother sit there, oh no, it's okay. She starts to sort of invest in herself a relationship that really necessarily doesn't really exist, even though she just hears about these things. So I think it's important because I'm trying to sort of put an understanding to my mother's own personal life to whoever is a professional that can make it better, because he was a part of my mother's life. You know, he was the only guy that showed up, and he was the only guy that there was a mutual conversation. I remember he called my mother and she was drinking a beer. You know, she were, vamos in one beer, you know, and they drank like half a beer and they had a booty call, whatever. So, you know, but there was just the official greeting and all that other stuff was as probably mutual as it could get with any relationship. Now, I'm not saying this coming from an expert in relationships because I've never had a girlfriend, an authentic girlfriend necessarily. I mean, I was with Ginger, but she gave me a fake name, and I don't know the story to the circumstances. But other than that, I never had a girlfriend. So, you know, other than that, you know, I've been intimate and people know about that, but I think it's important because that's how my mother had been viewed so much of her life. You know, you make babies, and that's how everyone looks at women, uh, especially the gays. You want to control because of Michael Jackson, and then give it to this person, and then just burn the time off, and then gays, trans, and lesbians control it. There's never going to be a change, no matter how right and precise I am. It doesn't change anything. There's no one that cares, that genuinely cares about my mother, that was willing to rule um, a hammer of justice. There wasn't, and there isn't. And so it's just a sad story. The president gave the orders. If his people fucked it up, then there's nothing you can do. Jesus Christ. There's enough details and things that they know, and you got to understand that some people want to want to play the suicide game. I'm going to do as much as harm as I can because I just feel content going all the way down to the grave and then dying that way. It's suicide. But I'm going to fucking start shooting like a motherfucker. And that's all they're doing. The intention is selfish and greed and keep a secret this over here. And I get the better life and you get a worse life. I get the better life. No, I know the hero life. No, okay, now poison him. Now you get to suffer like I do. So that way whenever they say you were right and you're right, okay, I poisoned you. You see how that works? And so then they'll do that. So I think it's important for me to talk about because that's the world that my mother was in, at least partial of it. So hopefully this makes sense. So you make the judgment of what you think and what you want, and you know, maybe you can figure out something else better. But I think it's important because I remember that. I was like, because I remember looking at my mother and she was just kind of like, she was excited, you know, it's like, oh, está estudiando. And it was like a couple of weeks y ¿cómo tú sabes? ¿Cómo sabes que tú no hablas con ellos? He goes, oh, no, no, no. And she wasn't looking at me necessarily. She's looking at the TV. And she's like, oh, no. And she looks at me for a second and she goes, oh, no, 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 yeah, no, yeah, no. Yes, I don't care. So she's like, well, I guess he didn't care. He didn't want to come by. He didn't want to pay bills. And I thought there was hope there, and there wasn't. And the reality of it was if he didn't show up and pay any bills, give any money or anything, that was the case of it. But it doesn't say that people didn't go after him because you never heard or saw that. That's why they can get away with it. So, I don't know what that situation is, you know, like particularly. So I'm not the expert in that relationship. So